I'm Sam, this is Trisha,
Hey.
and you're watching Grace Talks, Episode 9. This is a special vlog where we're going to be interviewing a very kind and wonderful person named Trisha. And I met Trisha at our church, and so she's got an interesting story about coming out of the faith of the LDS Church and into something that's becoming really common amongst people that do leave the LDS Church. So, Trisha, I was kind of curious if you would share your story with us. First of all, where were you raised?
For the most part, in Orem, Utah. So
what's it like? What's it like in Orem, Utah when you were younger?
it was a great place to grow up, just in terms of everyone around you pretty much has the same faith. It was a good hometown feel. I felt safe, and it was just tradition to go to church Sunday, and everyone was doing it, and I loved it. Actually, it was My dad worked for BYU. We moved there from Arizona, so he was transferred from being a high school music teacher to directing the Young Ambassadors, which is a performing group at BYU, and so that's what my family did. We were kind of the Von Trapp family singers of at least our ward, or whatever wards we were in. And
so you feel kind of like a superstar when you were younger?
A little bit in the shadows of the Osmonds, have to admit. And we actually, my brother and sister and I tried to run away to their house at one point, but that's another story. It's kind of fun. But
that's hilarious.
Yeah.
Well, we
watched them on TV and thought, our family.
We're the same.
If
they only discovered you,
could just discover our family,
they would have known.
We were kind of the Osmond family that wasn't.
Oh, right.
That's how I was thinking about even making a book or documentary someday, because truly my dad was like a music man. He was an amazing musician, and all my siblings are, and it's been weird as generations have come along, like my son, opera singer, and writing songs in LA, and just the grandkids and the great grandkids are super talented like musically, so it's just been fun to see my dad's legacy.
Music is an emotional and a wonderful thing. I think music is a powerful tool.
It's an important thing in the Mormon Church. I think there's a lot of emphasis on developing your talents musically and academic talent, just developing yourself in general.
And I noticed it's a lot of classical style music in the LDS Church.
Seems to be, yeah. It's only seemed like recently there's been a little bit more, with people going on like American Idol that are LDS or Mormon. I don't know what to call them. I guess Church of Jesus Christ. We have to do the whole thing now, but you know, but yeah, just to keep it short, I'll say LDS. But I think, definitely classically trained. Just a lot of hard work that goes into.
How many brothers and sisters did you have?
There's 8 of us.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm 7th of 8.
Was that pretty typical when you were growing up? Was that a normal number?
Sure. Yeah.
A normal number? 8 wasn't like on the bigger side?
It was like 6 to 8 seemed fairly normal. I mean, it was kind of odd if you had like people with like 2 or 3 or 4 kids in your ward.
Okay.
They were kind of the smaller families. Yeah. And then just definitely like 5 to 10 kids was pretty normal.
Okay. Wow.
There.
Okay. So that's normal.
Mm-hmm.
Growing up, would you say you had a pretty happy childhood?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think there were, times where I felt like maybe my family was, atypical. We had our challenges, dynamics or whatever. But for the most part, looking back, I think my parents really tried to be a unit in unity and raise us in the church and teach us to be honest and have basic good principles, and I think it was nice to grow up around that. It was atypical to know somebody that wasn't Mormon, or at least, some people were inactive.
Okay.
Is what we would call it, but
you didn't have any friends growing up or people that you knew that were your age they're not LDS?
No one that just had nothing to do with, or not, that weren't Mormon.
Wow.
I found out
there are
later.
very few people that can grow up in an environment like that, and across the country, you couldn't find maybe one religious group other than the Amish that could say, I didn't know one non-believer.
Yeah, I mean, I guess afterward, I found out that a fellow that was in one of my English classes got baptized when he was like 19, and I just assumed, because kind of the bad kids were Mormons too, kind of a thing. It was like, that's just how it was,
Okay.
We were all kind of practicing Mormons, but some were just a little bit more rebellious than others, doing, just shenanigans of sorts. I had my moments too, but I was pretty much, very much just wanted to, I think how I was perceived as I was definitely a faithful Mormon girl and trying to do the right things.
Okay, so on that note of being a faithful Mormon girl, what were the things that you were anticipating as a when you got into your teenage years?
Well, I think definitely waiting till you're 16 to date, is the rule, and I didn't keep it very well. I think I went to prom when I was 15, but I did try to keep that somewhat. But I think for me, I was always trying to do the right thing and trying to understand what my place was. And when I got into Young Women's, they were talking a lot about getting married in the temple.
Okay.
How that was your goal. Like that's the end all be all of where you want to be because you're.
Why is that? Why is that such an important thing?
I felt like for me at least how I took it in, it was kind of a mixture of that and Disney maybe, but it was that's where you're going to marry for time and all eternity. So you've got to be sure you're marrying the right person. And there was even some art and culture around that. There was a play called It's Not My Turn on Earth, Saturday's Warrior, where it was this narrative about this girl, like she's trying to find the right guy and she's just got all this anxiety about, trying to be with the right one. And I remember feeling that as a Mormon girl, just like, I dated a guy in high school I was really in love with, but I was just always wondering, like, is he the right one?
Right.
There was a lot of pressure for me to figure that out.
Because you have free agency, right?
Yes.
In that system, so that means, you're sort of part of that eternal question. I mean, some people worry about what they're going to do for a job the rest of their life. You're talking about who you're going to be in the presence of for all eternity.
For all eternity. Can I love this person, not just for here, but forever? Like
pretty high expectations for a fella.
For sure. And also to make that kind of a decision when it's made, you were kind of considered an old maid if you weren't married by the time you were 24, 25, something like that. I was almost 21 when I got married. And
okay. Well, I mean, that's pretty young by most standards.
It is. And truthfully, I was not in any place to really make that decision.
Okay.
From a very, emotional standpoint or, and everyone's different. I'm not saying all 21-year-olds are where I was, but I just was not ready to make that big of a decision.
Were you still in Orem at the time when you got married?
Yes, and I was still living at home. So I had gone away on study abroad for 6 months to London, which was wonderful. When I came home, I was still living at home and went on a 6-month mini mission to Texas, which we can talk about maybe another time. But that was, something that I did. And I came home and it was just literally like pressure and worry. I had sent out a missionary that I was waiting for, but then met the man that I ended up marrying. So there's always these.
What did you say?
I sent out a missionary.
What does that mean?
That is like, I'm sorry, that must be Mormon lingo. Just for girls, that happens to a lot of girls. They date in high school. They send out a missionary that they tell them they'll be here or like to be here when they get home.
You mean they send him a letter?
Or they send them, like, I sent him out like as a girlfriend, waiting for him.
Oh, like a
to marry
Dear John kind of situation.
Exactly, like hoping to marry
Johnny,
him.
I'm going to be here for you. Good luck at war. So you're kind of like, you give him a hug goodbye, and then this is the guy, this is the gal that maybe he's looking forward to seeing.
Yes. And
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you know him very well, the guy that you sent off?
We dated for 2 years, yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. So you were really excited for him to get home.
I was, except I met the man I ended up marrying, so I was in a lot of confusion.
So he got back earlier.
No, he came back actually a month later. So he extended his mission another month, which was interesting timing because I had met my ex-husband now. That it gave us extra time to get to know each other, and we got engaged during that month. So when he got home, it was a lot of...
You got engaged in a month?
We got engaged, it was 2 or 3 months later after we met. And then we got married like 3 months after that. So it was a very quick...
Oh, that's pretty fast.
Very fast.
Is that typical?
No, and we had some other circumstances, like he was leaving to work in New Jersey, and he didn't want a long-distance relationship, and I could respect
He's afraid
that.
old boy was going to come back and sweep you off your feet.
Well, he did come back, and I was confused. So he got some legitimate concern there, and I did have a lot of questions after, because I just didn't feel like I had the time to really make a sound decision, which wasn't fair to him.
Okay.
That's a whole fun story that I could write a book about, but thankfully now I'm over that and grateful for the choices I've made, even though they've been tricky, they've been hard.
Okay. So, but at this point, you're still a pretty happy, pretty satisfied in your faith kind of person at this point. You get married, and then as time goes on, obviously, you're not an active person in the LDS Church today. So,
I'm not.
so the
So what happened between then and
yeah,
now?
what happened? What kind of fell away?
Yeah, for me, I think it was a slow erosion, if you will, of my faith, and more so my faith in. I would never say it was my faith in Jesus Christ. That was always there. I just didn't know how to find him, given some of the circumstances I was in. I had a lot of death in my family, that seemed to make a sad space for me, but also just questioning a lot of things, not really being able to access as much as I would read. And I would say that the book of scripture that I read the most was the Book of Mormon.
Okay.
And as much as I would read that, I would definitely feel spiritual feelings, or feel like, this is, parts of this are meaningful when I'm reading about Jesus, but I really felt like I wasn't lacking that relationship, and I didn't know how to find it, and I felt like there was this barrier between me and him, and what was in that barrier was the space of everything I was supposed to be doing as a Mormon woman that I felt like I wasn't meeting.
So let me ask you about that. What you felt like there was sort of a barrier between you and Jesus. Like, you read about Jesus, but you felt like that you had no access to him because there were things in the way. Like, what kind of things?
Yeah, and if I can just, from a theological perspective,
Sure.
explain too that in Mormon theology, God and Jesus Christ are two separate beings. And so in a way, I kind of felt like I could access Jesus more, but we were taught we shouldn't pray to him, we should pray to the Father. And I don't know if it was my own psychology partly, and also theology, but I just felt like God was kind of this more demanding, critical, harsh, Father, if you will, and that Jesus was my mediator.
What gave you the idea that God was that way? I mean, it seemed like you had a pretty good dad, everything.
I did have a pretty good dad. There were some things in our relationship that I would say, maybe I transferred some of that to my concept of God, but I think it was more just feeling this kind of, I don't know how to explain it, like if I thought I'd sinned, I felt like I had to hide from him, and that somehow I needed to find a way for Jesus to go explain to him, they weren't the same kind of being where I could, or it's like I know that now they're on the same team, so to speak. Back then I didn't really have that concept as much, and I fully own that was maybe my psychology around it, but it was confusing. I think that whole theology was confusing to me.
Did you feel like asking questions?
I did, and I think I did ask a lot, just in my prayers, but then I also felt like I was holding back all the time and not really developing a relationship because I had a great deal of guilt and shame. I didn't know how to get past that, and it just seemed like it accumulated every time I thought I had done something wrong or wasn't meeting up to these things, so that we can get to these things I was supposed to be doing, like my genealogy and making bread and having 10 kids, and it just the list
making
went on.
Bread?
Baking bread,
That's a thing?
I think I'm realizing now it was probably a Utah cultural thing more than
sure.
How, and I was living outside of Utah in what they call the mission field, so I was living outside of that culture. That was what I grew up in. That my mom was baking bread pretty much every week and had 8 kids. And
why was she breaking bread?
She was making bread because I could think that was kind of the thing. Like you canned your peaches, and it showed that you were kind of thinking of the future when you're storing things and making sure your
caring
family.
For your home.
Caring for your home. It was kind of the way to be a good Mormon woman.
But that was a way.
Sewing. I think sewing was kind of implied in there too. You had to be a seamstress of some kind.
Was that some sort of sanctification process that was going on? You felt like by doing those things, you were being more obedient. And then not doing them.
Yeah, somehow I was falling short. Always. And I remember reading, and it's not as though I'm the first Mormon woman to feel this way. I didn't ever have her for English, but there was an English teacher where I went to high school, and I really admired her, respected her a lot. She spoke at one of our Mormon women conferences, and she said that her feeling was that, it's perceived that the more children you have, that's a notch in your spiritual belt, so to speak.
Oh, wow.
And when she said that, I thought, I relate to that, because for her, she only could have 2 children for medical reasons. For me, it was semi-medical. I had depression a lot, but I just felt like I was an inferior Mormon woman because I wasn't having a lot of children. And so, and then comparing myself, there was so much comparison, well, she's doing her, genealogy, or she's able to stay on top of all these things. How come I can't? There was always
How do
this.
people do the genealogy? Is that something extracurricular? Is that happens outside of church?
It is kind of more of a hobby. And I kind of just asked, somewhere in my heart, like, God, can I just put that one on hold till I'm older? Like when I'm elderly and my kids are raised and I can focus on my ancestors. But the point is that you're trying to do that so you can bring that to the temple and do temple work for your deceased ancestors.
Get them baptized and such.
Exactly.
Okay.
Do those ordinances for them that they can't do.
Okay.
That they're gone. So there's
sort of
kind of that
mounted
pressure. You're like, well, I'm not doing it. So are people like missing out on getting their temple work done because
when
of
did
me?
it bother you? When did that pressure or that anxiety hit you? I mean, was there
the
times
moment
of
I got
quiet or-
married and felt like, what does a Mormon mom and wife do? How do I fill these roles? And I'm trying to kind of subconsciously maybe do it like my mom did, but I look at my mom like I don't know how she did any of it. Like she had her first 5 kids in 6 years, and had lost one of my brothers to cancer already. I mean, I feel like I couldn't even compare myself to my own mother.
Did you feel like it was going to be natural when you got married, and it was just going to work?
Yeah, or just that they'd figure out a way to do it, to be that Mormon woman, And
When was the times that you felt, even in your marriage, even when when you were trying and you had this sort of shame or whatever, there were still positive times in your life, I'm sure.
For sure.
What were some of those positive things you remember?
I think definitely becoming a mother, that's, and it's still my heart. Like I love my children. They're both grown. They're living both in Long Beach, California, and they're responsible, good citizens and good people. I mean, and I really think that, and there were times that I felt great joy just with the people in my wards and congregations. I made really good friends and enjoyed that fellowship with them. Even though I felt like I wasn't measuring up church-wise, I always had good friends and lived in really great places even. We've lived kind of all over, and just getting to know different areas of the nation and different people, and having really good neighbors that didn't share my faith in a lot of different places, but seeing their cultures, that brought me joy. Just trying those things.
Yeah. How did you feel like what did you ever get the chance to share your faith with people that just as a snippet that weren't LDS? You had the sort of the same. What was your characteristic of someone? Why do you think at that time, if you can remember the way you thought, how did you view people who didn't know, maybe who were Bible-only Christians or that didn't know the doctrines? Was it just ignorance for them? How did you feel? What was the reason you felt they weren't LDS?
I remember thinking, and that's the thing that's coming to my mind is when I lived in Austin, Texas, or I guess Round Rock, right above Austin. It's north of Austin. I was surrounded by quite a few different Christians in different denominations, but mostly born again, non-denominational.
Okay.
I was invited to a Bible study, and I remember making an agreement with this beautiful woman that invited me. I just said, if I go to Bible study with you, will you study the Book of Mormon with me? And she actually agreed to do that. And I just felt like I've got to share this extra truth with her. She doesn't have the fullness of the gospel.
Sure.
And so I just need, to be able to have the chance to share that with her. I was kind of a different, now that I look back on it, kind of Mormon girl, because I started listening to Christian music, like Amy Grant. Michael W. Smith.
That was the gateway drug.
That's
what it was.
It was all your fault, Amy Grant, if you're listening. And yeah, I loved Christian music. It just spoke to me. And I, as far as my experience with the Bible, we were told in one of our articles of faith that we believe in the Bible as far as it's translated correctly. And in my studies and guide, and I don't remember reading it much other than in seminary, and we were given certain sections to read.
Oh.
So it's not as though we read it from beginning to end. And in our quad, if you would call it, you can call it that, with the Book of Mormon Bible and the Doctrine and Covenants and the Pearl of Great Price, there was the Joseph Smith translation. So there was, now that I'm looking back on it, I'm thinking I wasn't getting any outside commentary other than the Mormon commentary on the Bible at the time. But back to that experience, I think that I did have, I had a wonderful experience with these women in Bible study. Huh. And I remember being really impressed with just their simple faith in Christ and just wanting to access that myself, but not sure how to find it. And there was this confusion about, well, but I have more of the truth, so why do they seem like they're content with where they are and they're really faithful and happy? And it's not as though, she didn't have her own problems or other people, but there was just something, and I guess I just felt like they didn't have as many of the concerns that I did, or the guilt about not doing, they're fulfilling their calling at church, so to speak. Like I wasn't doing my visiting teaching well enough, or whatever it was that I was beating myself up for that month or day or hour. I don't know. So it was just kind of the sense that there's just this simple faith and approach to Jesus Christ that I wasn't understanding or getting.
So what was so there's this turning point. We flash forward. There's a lot of shame. There's a lot of hardship. There's some good times.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
But then you kind of roll forward to this moment. What was that? Like you said, it was a slow build.
It was.
What was that tipping point for you?
Well, I think a lot of it had to do with my marriage deteriorating too, because when you start losing sight of having that eternal marriage, that is so. And I think it was hard because we looked like this well put together family, and we didn't fight. I mean, it's not that we had this really tumultuous thing. I don't need to go into the whole story, but I think it was feeling like I was losing grasp of that. And then I had started studying some other things. One thing that the Mormon Church teaches is that they believe in all truth, and that there's this, I think if it's in the Doctrine and Covenants, seek ye out of the best books, learning or study even by faith. I can't remember the whole phrase, but even by study or faith. So that there's this idea that there's truth everywhere, and that we can seek that out. And so I started reading a course. It wasn't the Course in Miracles. It was Marianne Williamson's book called A Return to Love.
Okay.
And this was probably about, I would say, 6 months to a year before I separated from my husband and left the Mormon Church. But what I came to later understand is that book is based on a channeled book. If I don't know how familiar you are with the idea of channeling.
I'm not too familiar with it.
So channeling is this idea that someone has opened themselves up to the spirit or a spirit that is dictating this whole book to them, and that it's coming from a divine place. Okay. And so her book was more of a practical approach to talking about relationships and forgiveness, and it just seemed, if I can use that term, it resonated with me. I wanted a more practical way to live the gospel, and I thought, well, this is it. This is the way for me to live what my church is teaching. Just how to be practically forgiving, but what I didn't notice was that it talked about Jesus as a great teacher, maybe quoted a couple scriptures, and when I found out later, reading through or trying to understand what the Course in Miracles was, it talks about Jesus Christ, but more as an ascended master, moral teacher, but not as a savior. Okay. And so that was kind of if I can characterize it as this whole thought philosophy as New Age. That was my slide into that. Wow. And when I ended up having what I would call a spiritual experience, which I'm not still unsure it wasn't God, because I think I needed to just completely leave the church at that point. And it wasn't, I just wasn't fitting in it. I was having a lot of problems just going to church. What I was hearing from the pulpit was a lot of guilt and shame, and I'm never going to get it right. And my ex-husband would look over at me, he's like, "Are you crying again?" It was hard for me to sit there because I just felt like it wasn't going to measure up, and now my marriage is falling apart. I was definitely never going to make it. So I just had this experience, and I won't go into that in detail, but in that moment I knew I've got to leave my marriage and the church, and I'm going to this New Agey, if you will, school. But it seemed like a place where I could finally sort and figure out what I believe. And so it was kind of like I just got rid of it all, and it was not an easy time. A lot of change all at once. My son was on his Mormon mission at the time, so it was really hard on him. And then, my daughter was in her senior year, and so not being home for her and moving up to LA was hard for me. I felt like I'd abandoned her on some level, and even though she saw me regularly, and but it was just a hard time because I really knew that at the core of who I was, I needed to figure out who God really is. And my prayer through all of my master's program, swinging into this New Age movement, if you will, was to God, I need to know who Jesus Christ is. Please show me who you are.
Okay.
That was my prayer, because I had no idea. And I was certainly being taught there that he is an ascended master, a great moral teacher. In the back of my mind, however, was C.S. Lewis's book that I'd read a couple times, Mere Christianity. And when he says that whole thing about he's not, you can either shut him up for a fool,
lunatic,
but
liar, or Lord.
Yeah, or he's who he said he was. And I'm like, if he's truly someone we can trust, he's got to be who he said he was.
So those words of C.S. Lewis, he's a great theologian.
Yes, for sure.
Those are some of those things that stuck in your head, even after you had left the LDS Church and said, I'm going to believe, I'm going after this, and I'm going to listen to these people, I'm going to hear what they have to say, and I'm really going to indulge in it. I mean, did you feel like you really let go of everything and sort of took everything in that school?
I did, really, for the most part. I mean, I swung my pendulum from here to over here in many ways, just getting really involved in what this New Age world deems as spiritual experiences. And some of them seemed like they were. And because Mormonism focuses a lot on your own personal revelation and your own experience and feelings with things, it completely fit. It just seemed like, well, I'm just getting to another level of spirituality here.
Wow.
But the philosophy behind it, though, is that God is not outside of you as a sovereign being. God is you. God is experiencing itself through you. So whatever you do is not right or wrong. It just is.
So it's almost like Mormonism without the judgment.
Exactly.
Because as someone who's a Mormon, you do believe that you are somewhat divine.
Absolutely.
I mean, you're coming from God, right?
Mm-hmm.
So.
And they believe in Jesus Christ and that he's a savior. And so that was the piece that was definitely part of my Mormon theology, but that wasn't part of this new. He was definitely, a wonderful being that taught us such great truth, but so was Buddha, so was all these other ascended masters. So for me, it was like, how do I do that? Because I couldn't let go of this belief that Jesus Christ is my savior. And yet all these other things I was learning was that no, you're just here to become like him. You're here to become him, and that's the Mormon theology. You're here to become God, or a God. Not our God that we worship, but just that that's what your evolution or your progression is that you're going to become that. And so it just flows right into that with this other belief system, because it is about ascending. It is about becoming more and more spiritual and enlightened, and
I think that
progression thing.
Yeah, it seems like there's a desire for me to finally look at myself and say, yes, I've arrived. Yes, I've sort of become, I can respect myself. You know what I mean? I think I've heard somebody say that we just want to become the best version of ourselves. We want to, and this is somebody who has also left. I've talked to quite a few people who have gone into sort of more New Age thinking. Mm-hmm. They'll say sometimes that not that they're necessarily Buddhist, but that they really enjoy the Buddhist, sort of way of thinking. Mm-hmm. And I think that, like you said, that's interesting to hear you say that it seemed like a natural progression to you. It seemed like this made the most sense.
It did, and I have it. My oldest sister is practicing Buddhist. I love and respect her a lot, and she's one of the kindest, most generous people I know. And we've talked a lot about where we've been. She's seen me do this whole thing where we still love and respect each other a lot. But I think we're all on our own discovery and journey with things, and my experience is mine, and so all I can speak to is that. But I would say I can understand how that would feel good, because there's no judgment, like you said, and a lot of the idea is that we can just it's not like you're earning your way to heaven anymore, like in Mormonism, but you are having to evolve and progress. And I remember when things started kind of falling on its face for me in the New Age, one of the things that a lot of people in that movement, if you will, adhere to is the law of attraction. The idea that, you can, with your words and with your positivity, you can attract anything you want into your life.
That's such a big thing here.
Yes, it is. And so it's kind of like even taking another level, like you are creating your own reality. You're making your own experience as if you were your own creator.
Sovereign.
God, yeah. And so I just remember walking through my kitchen and when I lived in LA and it just stopped dead in my tracks. And I was like, because I was very discouraged. I was trying to start a business as a coach for women, and I was, having some dating issues and just trying to navigate life. And I was trying to be positive anyway and just look at gratitude and be in gratitude and all the things I knew I was supposed to be doing. And I realized I'm still doing the checklist.
Huh.
Like there's still a checklist in this, like I had in Mormonism, that I'm not fulfilling. It's not the baking bread or having all the kids, but it's all these other things that I feel like I'm again falling short, so that I'm not manifesting into my life what I really want.
And did you see other people in the New Age movement that you felt like they were better than you, that they had
Oh,
progressed
yeah.
much further, they were more disciplined and that sort of thing?
Yeah, there were women that had gone to my school that were like high paid coaches that were super successful, and that's how I was gauging it, was how they were making a living in LA and living a luxurious lifestyle.
Sure.
And yet they were spiritual, they were kind, they were good, they were, respected in their fields as coaches. And so I just thought, what am I doing wrong? How am I sabotaging myself? And I thought, well, it must be, the guy I was dating. He wasn't good for me, so I got rid of him.
Yeah, sure.
Moved myself in a more positive space. Still wasn't happening, so it just seemed like no matter what I was trying, it was the same thing. Like, I'm not in the universe's favor now. I wasn't in God's favor in the Mormon Church, and now I'm not in the universe's favor. Still haven't figured out this game yet. And it was discouraging.
Wow.
For sure.
So the end of that was the same end that you came to. Do you feel like was that darker for you, going through the New Age, after you came to the end of the New Age, the sort of path, than coming to the end of the LDS path?
Absolutely.
Really?
I feel like I at least had some, and I try not to get emotional saying this, some light and truth around who the truth of Jesus Christ is in the Mormon Church. In the New Age, I did not, and without going into a lot of detail, some of the spiritual things I got involved with, I believe, or I actually know on some level, that I opened myself up to some very dark, it was taught that there's no hell in the New Age, and I guarantee you there is a hell.
Wow.
And those that work on that side of things. And it was, without going into detail about what I was doing, I was involved in some spiritual activities that I think really opened me up to some dark places, and I was
possibly demonic.
Very much so.
Wow.
Especially in my dreams at night, I was fighting these things, and the only thing that I knew to do in my dreams was to call on Jesus Christ to help
really?
me. Yeah.
That's amazing.
It was. And so it started me, again, on that prayer, who are you? Show me who you are, because I know you are the only thing that's helping me in these dreams, even though I still was, into ecstatic dance and all these things I was involving myself in that I thought were making me free and closer to, who the truth of who I am. I was discovering more about the truth of me, but it's like it's not like I really got anywhere with that.
Wow.
Other than maybe I was a lot more relaxed about not having to check off any more lists. I let go of manifesting, but about the time I moved back to Utah, feeling like I should come here, and I didn't know why. I didn't have any real belief at that point. I was just trying to be a kind, good person.
Kind of on neutral.
To speak. Yeah. And just praying that prayer. So.
Wow.
Yeah, that's, I think that alone, and I was praying to, know my spirit guides. I was doing meditations about that, and every time I did, I'd have a dark dream again. And I was told by a psychic, not that I hired, but that was a friend of a friend, because I was having these dark dreams, that I was just coming into my spiritual gifts, which made me feel more powerful and spiritual, like I had something that I was going to do for people to help them spiritually.
Wow.
And so she's like, don't be afraid of it, just trust it. don't be afraid. And I'm like, there was some part of my spirit that was like, I have to be afraid of this. I was having my own discernment, and it was telling me this is not where I need to be dabbling. So, fast forward to after living in Utah for a year, I started dating someone I knew from high school who was raised Mormon and had become born again Christian. And while I was dating him, I came across a YouTube video by a guy named Stephen Bankars, who was a very affluent blogger for New Age stuff. I don't think it's any accident I came across his YouTube. It was a testimonial about how he met Jesus and could see finally the truth of what he was doing.
Wow.
He was being very duplicitous in his life and justifying it because there is no sin, really. And if you're advancing yourself, and this is maybe, part of what he's creating, and, there's a reason he's creating it. There's all these ways you can get around things and rationalize things to yourself in that thought, because, well, I'm just evolving, and this is part of my evolution, is I'm just sorting these things out. And while there seems to be some grace in that, it's not honest, know. And so he realized how depraved he was. He just kept feeling depraved, and that's kind of how I describe where I came to. And that's why he was raised in a Christian home, but had completely gone the New Age direction. And with that feeling of depravity, he just prayed, help me, and had an experience where he met the Lord on some level. I don't know what it was totally, but that's what got me thinking, why is he just talking about the Bible now? Why is this just this simple thing, and now he's just so clear that's all he needs? And so I started reading my Bible, and of course the guy I was dating was happy about that, and I said, I want to go to a church. I just want to praise, and I hadn't ever been in a place where I knew what praise and worship was, really, truly. I mean, we would sing hymns in the Mormon church, but it was fine. And it's not that I needed it to be a holy roller, kind of experience either, but I needed to feel like I could bring songs to God in a different way, because I love to sing. Yeah.
He was like right there listening.
Yeah.
And enjoying it.
I believe so.
Yeah.
And I think that, so that, this guy and I didn't have a great dynamic for sure, but I appreciate.
But he was part of your story, which is amazing.
Absolutely. And I appreciate so much that, he introduced me to a man who's had a ministry had one for over 50 years that just talks about the Bible, and he's been one of my greatest teachers.
Wow.
Just teaching me the simplicity and beauty of the gospel of Jesus Christ as it's found in the Bible. And so as soon as I started reading it by myself, just, forget Mormonism, forget the New Age, just here's Trisha with the Bible.
Yeah.
That's when I started feeling this really unexpected foundation growing under me.
Wow.
Like a rock. Just solid foundation.
I think Jesus said something about that.
I think he might have.
Yeah.
And I think that's just maybe my personality, that, maybe some people can discern things and just move right into it. I feel like I just had my own process, and he knows me very well, I believe.
Well, and not only that, but to know that God's sovereign hand, I mean, you've acknowledged that throughout your story.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people aren't ready to receive the gospel just because they came out of Mormonism.
Right.
And God sometimes lets them go through some really hard things. And what's interesting is you said that you had a clear understanding of your depravity.
Yeah.
Which you didn't have that coming out of Mormonism.
No,
probably. I
had a lot of guilt and shame, to be clear.
Because you weren't living up to your potential.
Right. Nor was I keeping all the, I wasn't doing all the things right.
So it's almost like you have free agency, but that means that if you have free agency and you're not doing it, it feels like it's your fault,
Well, yeah, and there's this idea too that, I really felt like I had to earn my salvation. Like I was working for my salvation, and there's a scripture that I think is maybe misunderstood, but if you just take it on face value, it says, for we're saved after all we can do. And I was like, how do I ever know if I'm doing enough? And for a perfectionist, that's never a good scenario.
That's what you thought when you read that? That was in 2 Nephi.
By grace we are saved After all we can do. Is
So
what it
by
says.
grace you are saved.
After
All
you can do. And I
Wow.
thought, okay, if it's after, then how do I know I'm at that after point?
Yeah.
And
I mean,
so
Ephesians 2 is like blowing up right here at this point of your story.
It is.
You're saying you have depravity. It says in chapter 2, you were dead in your trespasses and sins, in which you once walked, following the course of this world.
Absolutely.
You say you followed and you were kind of living your life by dark forces. It says you're following the prince of the power of the air.
That's it.
The Spirit is now at work in the sons of disobedience, among whom we all once lived in the passions of our flesh, carrying out the desires of the body and the mind, and were by nature children of wrath like the rest of mankind. But God, greatest two words of the Bible, being rich in mercy.
Yeah.
You know, because of the great love with which he loved us. Even when we were dead in our trespasses, made us alive together with Christ. By grace, you have been saved. So grace saves. It saves you out of depravity.
It does.
It doesn't save you out of being a really good person that worked really hard. It's like, okay, now you can have it. Like that's the idea of that goes against
like
it.
A little sprinkling on the top. Well done.
Yeah, which it means when you flow through that verse and it comes to that point where it says, for grace you've been saved through faith. This is not of your own doing. It is a gift of God. It's just given to you. Not the result of works, so that no one may boast.
Yeah.
How's that strike you now?
Well, I think that is the biggest fallacy of both what I thought Mormonism was about, was, saving myself. So there's self-righteousness in that. It sets us up to judge ourselves and judge others by what we are doing or what we're not doing. I think it's just a natural course for that kind of thinking or theology, if you will. Is you can boast, I am checking off the list.
Sure.
Or you can feel, either way, it's pride. I'm doing it great, or I'm not doing it well enough at all.
Wow.
And so it really becomes a prideful thing. And I think that's the part that even especially in the New Age, it felt like it was all about self-realization, self-esteem, self-worth, self-actualization, it was just all about the self with a capital S. And there was no room for a savior in that, or God that knows you and wants to have a personal relationship with you. It's you having a relationship with yourself and hoping that God comes along for the party.
Wow.
At least that's how I was seeing it.
Right.
And there was part of me that, I was doing things in my life, definitely I would call it sin, that I was justifying, saying it wasn't because there's no sin. I'm just experiencing, God's experiencing itself through me. So anything goes.
Yeah. But something didn't set right with that.
No, I can guarantee there was part of my psyche and my spirit, if you will, that was like, and I will say this unequivocally, I was in the young women program a lot in the church. And, I wasn't a horrible person, but I think I could probably give a lesson to young women and youth on why it's important to stay morally pure and clean, which is a lot of what we were taught growing up in the church, from a much different place now than I ever did then.
Wow.
Because I understand grace better now than I ever did then. Because if there was sin, I think they think they're done for. And back to what you said about the gospel, I think when people come out, they're not ready to accept the gospel of Jesus Christ. I think it's because in the Mormon church you think you had that and it didn't work.
Wow.
So we got to try something else. We're going to become agnostic or atheist, or maybe slide into a spiritual practice that at least feels a lot less judgmental and forgiving and loving. And one thing I will say about the New Age is it seems to be a lot of people that have come out of religion that have been hurt by religion, not understanding grace and who Jesus Christ really is, and they come to each other and they seek gurus and people that are saying things that help them feel like it's all about love, which is kind of the truth, but not totally. And so there's it's like Satan's best ploy, right? He can mirror truth almost to the extent where it's just completely deceiving, and you think this is all there is.
Yeah.
And when I was there, I thought, wow, this, I'm just the most loving spiritual person I've ever been in my life.
Sure.
Which might have been true to an extent, but I didn't have the foundation for any of that to stand on. And I kept seeking and seeking and seeking, and I could have been seeking until I die and not really ever feeling that foundation under me.
Wow.
So
and that's so
what
interesting.
was
You use
different
that
for
word,
me.
foundation. So. It's that's such a great word. Jesus, when he says, whoever builds their life upon my words,
yes,
is like someone who builds a house upon the rock. Mm-hmm. When storms come, that person is able to stand because they're standing on, the principles of what I have taught. And I think that's so fascinating because, when you want to build your house, sometimes we just think of the house is going to be great. Mm-hmm. I'm going to have all these rooms. And let's say somebody builds a house for you. You're like, I don't like this house. There's things about it I don't like. And finally, you give yourself permission to tear it down. Yep. And you thought the problem was with the house. So you build a different house, and maybe that's a New Age house, maybe that's like a Buddhist house, maybe that's like a, whatever, maybe an agnostic house.
Sure.
Maybe whatever it is, you build that house, but if it's not according to the principles.
I guess it's my house.
Yeah, this is my house.
It's my creation.
Yeah. You're saying that there was this insecurity eventually that you felt, that the security of you being your own standard eventually wasn't enough.
Work. Yeah.
Wow. What would you say, and this is the last thing I would ask, because I think this is fascinating. I could probably talk for another 2 hours on this.
Probably, me too.
But what would you say to somebody who's at that point where they're like, yep, I'm just delving in, and I'm really digging the New Age movement? Call you in 2 years?
Yeah, seriously. I would just, first of all, say I understand, especially if they've been hurt by religion, where it was about the law versus grace. And I think if I could teach them anything, if we could sit down for a couple hours together and have coffee, I would say, let's talk about law versus grace. Let's talk about what Paul was teaching about that. And if you're under one, you are going to feel like you couldn't do it because that's what you were under. But I think when you really start to understand the grace of Jesus Christ and just all that the cross is and what he did, there's no more working and feeling like you failed. And so there's just receiving that grace.
Wow.
And I think that's what I was missing, and I'm still trying to understand. It's because my habits and constructs are still that I've got to do something, and really now all I'm telling myself is I've just got to open the Word and be guided to where I read, and I am. I feel like I'm in kind of an interesting place with that, because I do think that we are guided directly by Jesus Christ. And this morning, 2 Corinthians, I just read the whole book, and it was exactly what I needed to read. And so I'm loving the Word more than anything in my life.
Wow. And
that's what I would tell them. Like, there's something that seems that we've been told is so archaic, it doesn't relate to us. It was, all these hands have gotten on it. It's not, these are all the things that a lot of my New Age friends think about the Bible. And I'm just saying, read it, give it a chance. And then, if it doesn't do anything, but I guarantee it will, you got to be ready for it to affect a change in your life, because it will. I mean, there's a lot of my dear friends that still have those beliefs that, that truth is everywhere, and you just take it from everywhere. And I do believe that God is over all, and that he leads us. I think I went the direction I did for whatever reason, but that was my process. But I wish I would have fast-tracked over to where I am now, because I had a lot of heartache and a lot of sadness about some of my choices.
I think sometimes we feel that way too, when we think, I wish it would have been different. I wish I would have had it differently. I wish that things would have gone differently, had a different way. But I think that what's been powerful about your testimony is you are showing, I think that the prodigal son who ran away from his father ends up, sleeping with pigs. Yep. I think that maybe he looked back and said, gee, I wish it could have been a different way. But that was the only way. I mean, the amazing thing is, this is how God showed you your depravity, and then this is how grace led you back. And it's true. I wish that when you just shared with people that put their faith in their hard work, and that, yeah, grace and my work, I like my work because I like to be able to say that I'm helping. I wish I could just it would just be so effective when we just simply said, look, you're saved by grace, and grace is what causes you to work.
It is.
It's
out of gratitude, out of
it's just awesome. It's
yeah.
like you're just in the family, you know. You get to do things, and grace changes us so that we can do the work.
It's that enabling power. Fascinating that you brought up that parable. So I was writing my last paper for I don't know what the program I was in, which I want to be clear, I don't want to disparage, because it did teach me a lot, and I was able to unpack a lot of my psychological stuff in that class, and I loved the people in there, and it was a good experience in a lot of ways. And it's the philosophy behind it that
Made you think.
Made me think. But I was writing that paper and felt very strongly the presence of the Lord telling me to read that parable, or the prodigal son. And part of me was like, I don't even know where my scriptures are right now, because I hadn't opened them for a couple years.
Wow.
But that was the clear message that he wanted me to hear that day and apply it to this. I was trying to work with that 20-year-old self of mine that made that marriage decision. Kind of but it was one of our approaches to psychology and how we work with people in one of these modalities. I was trying to forgive that 20-year-old person, and that's when I felt that I needed to read that. And I had not had any grace for myself, certainly. I'd been holding her hostage, not forgiving her, but also needing to just give all of it, all of everything I was doing and had done to God, and knowing that I'm still welcome.
Yeah, he takes that big mess.
Yeah.
He takes all of it.
He's still doing it.
Amen.
He's still untangling all those knots that I can't.
Amen.
And I love giving it to him because I trust him completely. God. So,
well, Chris, before we both lose it, I think that is amazing. I want to thank you so much for coming and talking to us. I hope that's helpful. Yeah. I'm so grateful that you shared that with us, and I hope it's a blessing to somebody who watches this. So thank you.
Thank you, Sam.